he's going to talk about the ontology of Stoic lekta, metaphysics of subsistence, and conflagration. Thanks a lot, Michele. You have about 45 minutes.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I must share my paper for. Okay. Done. Okay. 45 minutes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. In proposal, another attempt at an explanation of the ontological status of Stoic lekta, I should like to pursue a different path, one to my knowledge not yet explored by any scholar. While this should make me cautious, on the other hand, I believe it is worth trying because it brings into play factors that have been neglected until now, whose involvement can perhaps help us better understand how the Stoics conceive of the ontological status of those particular incorporeal entities that are lekta. Usually, when we talk about lekta, we always refer to the immaterial entities that rational human beings can say and think during their finite existence. We are thus speaking of beings whose life unfolds within one of the infinitely many diakosmeses that intermittently characterize the eternal and divine Usia. As is well known, the phases that alternate and contrast with the diakosmeses are the conflagrations, which always and from eternity entail the complete destruction of the first ones. Text from T14 to T16. Diakosmesis and ekpyrosis are described in the sources as typoseconta of that Dios poion, which is eternal Usia. Zeus, text under T17. For the Stoics, there is ultimately but a single individual, and this individual is Zeus. He is eternal fire, which, as said, undergoes the alternation of two states, or poseconta, conflagration and diakosmesis. In both states, we are dealing with Zeus, only that in conflagration, Zeus is entirely himself. He is the whole cosmos or Usia, whereas in the regime of diakosmesis, Zeus is only heaven or ether, and as such the rational soul of the cosmos. In both conflagration and diakosmesis, it is likely that Zeus thinks, in the former case alone, in the latter together with and above a plurality of finite rational subjects. Text under T18. When Zeus, as primordial fire, is converted into the four elemental masses, diakosmesis arises as a stratified and ordered complex. The diakosmesis, the generated and perishable cosmos, is a living organism analyzable in terms of exis, physis, and psyche. Thanks to this complex structure, the diakosmesis can be described as the union of the soul and the body. Cosmic soul has in Zeus its ruling part. The cosmic hegemonicon was identified by Chrysippus with the heaven or with the purest part of the ether. Text under T19. Zeno thus defined the heaven. The heaven is the outermost boundary of the ether. In it and from it, all things become visible. It contains every reality except itself. It does not contain itself, but it contains everything else. This Zenonian definition explains why Chrysippus considered himself justified in making the two just mentioned identifications, heaven and the purest part of the ether, evidently its outermost boundary, are the same thing. Now, Zeus, insofar as he is a hegemonicon of the cosmos, sees all things and contains all things. The all-encompassing character of the cosmic hegemonicon helps to explain why the Stoics maintained that the souls of all rational beings are its parts. See Epictetus' text under T19. It remains unclear, however, whether the Stoics conceived of the Stoic hegemonicon first as constituted by the minds of individual rational beings, or two, as a supermind which embraces and includes all of them within itself. In the former case, Zeus would not possess a mind distinct from or superior to the individual minds that compose it. His mind would be identical with the sum of the rational minds of all living beings. His thoughts would be nothing more than the sum of all individual thoughts. In the latter case, by contrast, the cosmic hegemonicon would be a superior mind that contains within itself all individual minds as its parts, without thereby being reducible to them. The thoughts of Zeus would not be identical to the sum of rational thoughts of finite beings. They would be something different or broader, to which we have no access at all, or at best, only a partial access. In the first scenario, everything rational beings think would be exactly what Zeus thinks, and what Zeus thinks would consist solely of what rational beings think. In the second one, everything rational beings think would always be available to Zeus, again Epictetus under T19, but it would not be identical with what Zeus himself thinks, or if it were, it would be so as a part of much broader and more complex thoughts unavailable in their entirety to finite rational beings. The lekta, as I have said, are described as the entities with which the minds of individual rational beings within the cosmos enter into relation. This relationship is twofold. Lekta can be the objects of our rational fantasiae, and lekta are always related to our rational fantasiae, regardless of whether they have corporeal or incorporeal objects. If this is true for our finite minds, it will be even more so for Zeus, who is mind of minds, the mind of the cosmos. So here I assume that Zeus, as hegemonicon, as mind, forms fantasiae with lekta, both as their correlates and as possible objects. Accordingly, all the thoughts of these minds, together with their corporeal objects and correlates, either first constitute the mind of Zeus in its entirety, or two, are only contained within it. Which of two hypotheses should we prefer? I lean towards the second one. If it is true, in fact, that the cosmic hegemonicon as heaven embraces everything, and that therefore everything that heaven comprises can be described as a part of it, it is also true that, strictly speaking, the minds of finite souls are not parts of heaven. For the heaven surrounds and encompasses us, but our minds are not located in the heaven. Within the framework of this second hypothesis, two alternatives emerge. First, either all the lekta thoughts by rational beings or correlated with their thoughts are not the lekta thoughts by Zeus or correlated with his thoughts, or two, they are merely parts of Zeus's much broader thoughts. Here too, I incline toward the second alternative. There cannot be complete separation between thoughts of individual rational beings with their incorporeal objects or correlates, and the thoughts of Zeus with his incorporeal correlates or objects. If this were the case, why Zeus would know all the thoughts of rational beings, according again Epictetus under T19, there would be no relationship between the lekta with which he entered into relationship and those with which individual rational beings enter into relationship. We could therefore say that the lekta thought by rational living beings or related to their thoughts are only parts of the lekta thoughts by Zeus or related to his thoughts. This is what happens in the regime of diacosmosis. Let us now consider what happens during the conflagration. Let us hear directly from two passages, text of Plutarch and Origen under T18. The first is the following. In his Providence book first, Chrysippus says, when the world is fiery through and through, it is directly both its own soul and its commanding faculty. But when, having changed into moisture and soul which remain barren, it has in a way changed into body and soul, so as to be compounded out of this. It has obtained another principle, allontina esque logon. The second reads, the god of the Stoics, inasmuch as he is a body, sometimes has the whole substance as his commanding faculty. This is whenever the conflagration is in being. At other times, when world order exists, diacosmesis, he comes to be in a part of substance. During diacosmesis, God, Zeus, is only in a part of substance, which, as we know from Chrysippus, is heaven or the purest or outermost part of the ether. During the conflagration, however, Zeus as hegemonicon is the whole of substance. The fiery substance is Zeus's hegemonicon and nothing else. According to the first text, in the transition from diacosmesis to epuresis and vice versa, the logos of the cosmos, that is, of Zeus himself, changes. It is not clear what this means. Perhaps it is meant to indicate that Zeus achieves a greater or lesser degree of unity depending on whether the one or the other condition of the cosmos prevails. Complete and perfect unity in the regime of conflagration, imperfect and partial unity in the regime of diacosmesis, when he is merely, so to speak, the hegemonicon of the soul of the cosmic body. We also know that during conflagration there is no trace of evil, which again means that there is only Zeus as virtue, as recently argued by Nathan Powers in a paper appeared in Phronesis of a few weeks ago, that Zeus and cosmos are wholly coextensive. There are indeed texts that allow us to describe the conflagration as the triumph of Zeus's rationality and unity, texts under T20. We also know that this triumph results in an intellectual cognitive activity, knowledge in its highest form, supreme episteme, Nemesius under T20 and Zeno under T22. We know that Zeus has his cogitationes, Seneca under T20, which are of course fantasiae, impressions, states of his hegemonicon. The problem is, of what are Zeus's fantasiae, impressions during conflagration? Since no individual body survives the combustion, since the diacosmesis itself has been consumed and dissolved by the action of fire, we cannot ascribe to Zeus and his thoughts during conflagration the same object which he was engaged with as a hegemonicon of a cosmic soul during diacosmesis. We are therefore compelled to suppose that if these fantasiae have an object other than Zeus himself, this object must consist of impassible entities, and the only impassible entities that are noeta, that is capable of being intellectually grasped, made objects of fantasiae or cogitatio, are the incorporeals, among which, of course, are the lekta. Put differently, if it is true that during the conflagration there is only Zeus, that in this state Zeus enjoys a particular kind of unity and integrity, a different kind of logos, that these conditions enable Zeus to exercise a distinctive kind of rational activity culminating or resulting in an episteme, then the ontological status of the objects of this knowledge can only be incorporeality, and as such must primarily concern the lekta, plausibly axiomata. But why primarily the lekta? To answer this question, let us read what Nemesius under T20 reports. The gods, who are not subject to the distraction thanks to their knowledge of a single period, know from it all the future things that will exist in subsequent periods. In fact, there will be nothing different from things that have existed before, but all will exist in the same way, indistinguishably, down to the smallest details. Some might argue that Nemesius is not referring here to the conflagration, but merely stating that only the gods not subject to destruction, namely Zeus alone, are omniscient. Yet I believe that if Nemesius had intended to say only this, he would have referred directly to Zeus without evoking the conflagration or mentioning the destruction of the rest of the pantheon. Moreover, the language used here seems to point both to a past phase, paratagenomena proteron, and to a future one, tamellonta esestai entae excess periodois, thereby situating the cognitive activity in question between these two phases. We should not forget, furthermore, the initiatory character of Chrysippus' doctrine of conflagration, which lends itself to a deliberately reticent use of language. I therefore interpret the phrase tus eustus me hypokeimenus te Torah as follows: gods who, as they are not subject to destruction, do not face it during the conflagration. The text then states that Zeus, during the conflagration, by hypothesis, when he alone of the gods remains, all the others has been dissolved by fire, by attending to this single period, that is, to the just destroyed diacosmesis, knows from it all the future things that will exist in subsequent periods. In plain terms, he knows the future from the past. But this knowledge, by hypothesis, occurs in the present of the conflagration between the past diacosmesis and the future one. We seem, therefore, compelled to conceive of this particular kind of knowledge as cognition of something present, then that, nevertheless, concern both past and future. Useful information in this regard seems to come from a passage of Sextus, T21, where we learn that the Stoics conceived of the sign as a present sign of a present thing. Sextus gives two examples of conditionals. The first involving a semioton concerning a past event, the second a semioton concerning a future event. Sextus reports the Stoic criticism directed against those who claimed, in these cases, that the sign was the sign of the past thing in the one instance or of a future thing in the other one. The criticism is explained as follows. Those who make such statements do not realize in fact that, though the past and future are different, the sign and its object, even in these cases, are a present thing of a present thing. For, in the earlier example, the wound has already happened and is past, but this man has had a wound, which is a proposition, is present, though it is said about something which has happened. And in the case of if his man have been wounded in the heart, this man will die, the death is in the future, but the proposition, this man will die, is present, though it is said about what is future, because it is true even now. On the basis of this passage, we may say that Zeus knows now, that is, during the conflagration by hypothesis, all the true axiomata concerning the just past diacosmesis. Furthermore, since in the future diacosmesis there will be nothing different from the past one, perfect knowledge of the propositions concerning the past diacosmesis is equivalent to perfect knowledge of all the true axiomata concerning the future diacosmesis. This science is equivalent to truth itself, text under T22, which is both one of the name of Zeus and of a state of hegemonikon, described as episteme panton aleton apophantike. Since truth, in this sense, pertains to the human hegemonikon, all the more will it pertain to the divine one. The science exercised by Zeus, especially during the conflagration, is therefore omniscience. During the conflagration, then, Zeus formed impressions of the lekta concerning all the events that took place in the past diacosmesis. These impressions of lekta about past events correspond to the impressions he had of the same events as a hegemonikon of the cosmic soul while they were unfolding or taking place. A passage in Plutarch may help us to understand better what Zeus's knowledge of the past consists in. It is found in De Solertia Animalium under T21, where we read, memory is comprehension of an assertible concerning the past, the present of which was apprehended from perception. Here, by a proposition or assertible concerning the past, we must understand a present axioma about the past of the kind exemplified by Sixtus in the just quoted passage. Since in the present of a conflagration no bodies are available to be perceived, Zeus' knowledge of the past through true axiomata, may be described as a system of acts of memory. We still have a further question. What happens during the conflagration to the lekta thought and said by finite rational beings? They do not seem to be the same as those with which Zeus stands in relation. At most, as noted, they are only a part of them. Do they then perish as well when the diacosmos is destroyed? This would not appear possible. The incorporeality renders them impassible, protected them from destruction. If they were destroyed, they would suffer something. I note en passant that the Stoics admitted only one case in which a lecton is destroyed, the demonstrative assertible said of someone who is no longer there. Text 23. This case, therefore, seems to be the classic exception that proves the rule and suggests that other lecta are not subject to destruction. Let us see whether the sources provide elements sufficient even to sketch an answer. Let us return to a passage of Nemesius. At a certain point, we read, "And from the beginning, the cosmos is reconstituted in the same way, and when, likewise, the stars resume their course, everything that happened in the preceding period comes to happen in an indistinguishable way. For Socrates, Plato, and every human being will exist again together with the same person, friends and fellow citizens. They will undergo the same things, encounter the same person, and undertake the same actions, and every city, village, and countryside will be reconstituted in the same way." Here we find documented the orthodox Stoic version of the doctrine of eternal return of identical, a version ascribed by most scholars to Chrysippus. Without entering now into its details, this doctrine affirms both the numerical identity and the indiscernibility among the infinite diacosmeses. In particular, I wish to draw attention to the following point of the text. Socrates, Plato, and every human being will exist again together with the same person, friends, and fellow citizens. They will undergo the same things, ta auta paesestai, encounter the same person, and undertake the same actions. Every human being will undergo the same things, that is, each will again receive and form, among other things, the same fantasiae, which are pate, affections. This means that the lecta which rational beings say and think in the present diacosmesis are the very same that they have said and thought in all the infinite past diacosmeses, and that they will say and think in all the infinite future diacosmeses. But this also means that the lecta which rational beings do not say or think in the present diacosmesis, though they might have said or thought them as related to their fantasiae, are the very same that they have not said or thought in all the infinite past diacosmeses, and that they will not say or think in all the infinite future diacosmeses. Now, thanks to their impassibility, all these lecta do not cease to subsist during the conflagration. But if they pass unharmed through the conflagration, where it is that they subsist, perhaps in something like the already evoked memory of Zeus, the lecta that rational living beings have said or thought, or could have said and thought, are all crammed into the memory of Zeus, and in this sense they subsist. When the cosmos is reformed and Zeus becomes the hegemonic part of the cosmic soul, he makes every time the same identical entities available to the same identical rational living beings. In the divine logos, that is, there subsists eternally a reserve that includes only and only the lecta that will be evoked or non-evoked by each individual rationality in each cosmic cycle. This reserve is the set of sayables, the things that can be and are said, that can be and are thought. They subsist as the horizon of a sayable connected to the thinking and speaking portion of the cosmos. We may thus hypothesize the subsisting of a structure of a lekta within the divine logos linked to the minds of rational beings in every cosmic cycle, a sort of archive of a sayable. This allows us to conceive of lekta as eternal, repeatable, and subsistence only in connection with the fantasiae logicae of rational subject across the infinite cycles. This hypothesis provides a basis for conceiving of logos not only as the causal principle or causal principle of reality, but also as its semantic archive. The structure of lekta subsisting within the divine logos is finite, determined once for all in each cosmic cycle, and stratified. Finite because finite is the number of individual, of their mental and linguistic acts, and of the configurations that occur in each cycle. Determined once for all because the divine logos presides over the end and recurrence of the diacosmeses, each identical to the other. Stratified at least on two levels. The first, consisting of a lekta actually said, thought, and heard in each cycle. The second, consisting of a lekta never said, thought, or heard in any cosmic cycle, but which could have been said, thought, and heard. The cosmic logos is therefore a closed reserve of sayability. Each rational act or meaningful sentence, fantasia and logos, is already predetermined in the reserve as the mental correlate or significant expression of a determinate complex of lekta and of that complex alone. This interpretation gives the verbal adjective lekton a double nuance, lekton as sayable, that is actually said, and lekton as merely sayable. The latter one in particular carries also a modal connotation, for the Principian doctrine of modality holds that what is possible remains such even if it never comes to realization. According to this conception, a pragma may be sayable, remaining thus a lekton, even if no one ever will in fact say it. Not everything that exists has access to this reserve. Only rational beings, as such capable of fantasiae logicae, have access to this structure. Since rational beings are always the same in each cycle, the reserve is identical in every cycle and constitutes an immutable deposit of what is sayable. We must now ask what kind of relationship exists between Zeus's fantasiae and the incorporeals by him known during the conflagration. Can we affirm that they are entities independent of Zeus? They are evidently entities to which Zeus guarantees the integrity and impassibility they must possess in order to escape the destructive grip of fire. They are entities that he himself constitutes, and precisely because it is he who constitutes them, they bear the full seal of Zeusian rationality. The incorporeals are therefore Zeusian entities. Indeed, they are the Zeusian entities par excellence, since they are the only ones that are there thanks to their subsistence, both in the regime of conflagration and that of diacosmesis. In particular, with regard to lekta, we may fairly affirm that they depend upon Zeus's fantasiae. This dependence is the absolute, is an anti-Platonic move, absolute guarantee of their ontological and cognitive reliability. It is also the guarantee of their objectivity. In light of this consideration, how should we conceive of the relation between our fantasiae and the lekta? There seems to be two possibilities here. The first is the following. Our fantasiae are all logicae and are in some way parts of Zeus's cogitationes, because our minds are first and foremost parts of Zeus's hegemonicon. Thus, just as the lekta during the conflagration ontologically depend upon Zeus's cogitationes, so too the lekta in the regime of diacosmesis depend upon our fantasiae, insofar as all our fantasiae are parts of Zeus's fantasiae. This dependence should not be thought as something that threatens the integrity and objectivity of these entities, for these entities are guaranteed by Zeus himself with respect to all these prerogatives: objectivity, public character, shareability. The dependence of the lekta upon thought and language finds its foundation in the dependence of the lekta upon Zeus's nous, upon his cogitationes. The other possibility is a kind of compromise between dependentism and independentism. One might say that, whereas these entities during the conflagration depend upon Zeus's mind, in the regime of diacosmesis they are indeed dependent upon Zeus's mind, but are, in some sense, independent of our individual minds. The lekta depend upon Zeus's mind, but precisely because our minds are only parts of Zeus's mind, the lekta do not depend upon our minds in the way they depend upon Zeus's mind. Even if such a distinction can be established, we cannot go so far as to say that the lekta are wholly independent of our fantasiae. We may at most speak of relative, non-absolute independence, and this relative character of independence of the lekta is recalled by the preposition kata and ek that recur in the Stoic characterization of the mode of being of the lekta. Text from T11 to T13. The second view is consistent with a framework that has emerged regarding the relationship between finite minds and that of Zeus. For we have seen that our minds are not parts which united compose the entire divine mind, but are fragments contained within it, which even altogether remain nevertheless partial with respect to Zeus's mind. In light of this situation, it is legitimate to think that what applies to Zeus and his thoughts need not to apply to us or applies to us differently. If it is true, then, that the lekta depend upon Zeus's thoughts, it does not necessarily follow that they must depend in the same way upon our thoughts. These entities are not Platonic entities. They are independent of our individual minds, but do not enjoy absolute ontological autonomy, since in the final analysis they depend upon Zeus's mind. The kata of the definition of lector T11 would serve to recall precisely this. The difference between our individual minds and Zeus's minds seems to explain the gap between these entities, which are rationally perfect, and our thought language, which must purify and disambiguate itself, not in order to establish a connection with them, for the link between lekta and logoi fantasiae has already been instituted by Zeus himself, but in order to correspond to them in the best possible way. We are always already being in connection with this entity, through the logoi of others, when we ourselves are still devoid of logos, through all our own logoi and our logicae fantasiae from the age of 14 onwards. Our task is to purify our logoi, govern our fantasiae, and learn to connect them correctly, so that the incorporeal contents correlated with them may ever more clearly emerge. In light of these considerations, how are we to conceive of the subsistence of the lekta? In what sense, as Zeusian entities, are they subsistent entities? The incorporeals are the only entities that are there during the conflagration, except the theory cosmos, of course. Yet they cannot be there in the manner of bodies which alone exist. We must think this status in relation to the absence of corporeality that characterize these entities. If bodies act or are acted upon, and in so doing are or exist, incorporeals neither act nor are acted upon. In this sense, they subsist. By subsisting, they allow bodies to be or exist in the way they are meant to be or exist. Lekta allow fantasiae and logoi to be or to exist precisely as fantasiae and logoi. If there were no lekta, fantasiae would be mere affection and logoi mere sounds. In both conflagration and diacosmesis, it is implausible that Zeus speaks. Zeus does not speak, he thinks. We, by contrast, both speak and think. The Stoics sought to safeguard the unity of this bifurcation through their affirmation of the identity, in the case of rational beings, of inner logos and spoken logos. The lekta, which subsist as correlates of our fantasiae, are also intrinsically, owing to this bifurcation, for us, the meanings of our logoi, precisely by virtue of a unity that subsists between inner and spoken logos. Their subsistence indicates the availability of these entities to become and to configure themselves as objects of thought and of discourse, noetà, possible objects of fantasia, lekta, possible objects of discourse. As regard to the relation between euparxis and hypostasis, or between euparchei and hypostanae, I'm strongly inclined to believe, fully converging here with the conclusion of Vanessa de Harden's most recent research, that euparxis is not a supplementary mode of being in addition to hypostasis. Only if euparxis were understood as an additional modus essendi, could the lekta themselves be conceived of a state of affairs belonging to the furniture of the world. What has been argued so far confirms and strengthens these conclusions. If euparxis were an additional mode of being, it would concern only the diacosmesis and not the conflagration, in which no interaction among intracosmic body takes place. But if instead we conceive of euparxis not as mode of being, but as the function of the privileged, that is, truth-bearing relation of certain lekta, the axiomata, to the state of the world, past, present, and future, then we can refer euparxis both to diacosmesis and to the conflagration. We can therefore say that the axiomata known by Zeus during the conflagration are all true, that is, they all have euparxis, because they faithfully depict the state of the world concerning the past and future diacosmesis. I would even go so far as to say that, since during the conflagration all the axiomata known by Zeus are true, euparxis conceived of in a veridical and relational, rather than an ontological sense, pertains above all to the conflagration. If, on the other hand, we were to conceive of it as a mode of being added to hypostasis, we would be forced to deny euparxis any role during the conflagration, that is, during the most virtuous and rational phase of the life of the cosmos. My interpretation confirms that lekta are always and only subsistent, and also confirms that euparxis does not concern them intrinsically, but only in the relationship that some of them, the true axiomata, have with the world. From this reconstruction, the incorporeals emerge as real entities subsisting both in the regime of conflagration and in that of diacosmesis. In this sense, conflagration represents a unique and privileged point of observation on incorporeal somethings, their status and their behavior. It allows us, indeed, to observe them in their relation of connection with a single body, the fiery cosmos. A passage informs us that during the conflagration, reality manifests itself in an elemental form, as constituted solely by fire, in which only God and matter are preserved. If the hypothesis is correct, that the incorporeals are there as subsistent items even during the conflagration, then they come to acquire the status of basic ontological entities. In this sense, subsistence. The diacosmesis, by contrast, is the posecon of the eternal cosmos richer in ontological terms. While during the conflagration there are only God as fire and the incorporeals, the diacosmesis contains, in addition to the incorporeals, all bodies and all types of body. It is therefore only with reference to the latter that the Stoics were able to develop fully their ontology of something. I go to the conclusion. The lekta turned out to have been conceived of by Chrysippus as subsistent entity, that is, as objective and real entities inherent to the mind of Zeus and correlated always and forever with our finite and mortal minds. The Stoics thus developed the conception of lekta in a relation of strong structural dependence upon their cosmogonic cosmology, which determined their ontological status as well as their cognitive and semantic function. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michele, for this great talk. Any questions?
Microphone.
Any questions? Sorry. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Vanessa?
Hi. Hi, nice to see you. Thank you. I guess I have one question. I'm intrigued by this idea that the incorporeals are there during the conflagration. And maybe there was some evidence for that at the end that we didn't go through. But my question is just what evidence is there that they are still there? I have thought about this in terms of time, but I don't know that I've thought about it as a general thesis.
We have no text that explicitly says that lekta survives during conflagration. But I think that we can proceed to this deduction from a lot of facts that take place during the conflagration. The first one is that Zeus is the whole of Usia as hegemonic god. The second one is the text by Seneca in which we read that Zeus withdraws in his cogitationes. And the third text is from Nemesius, in which we read that the gods that survived the destruction, the gods not subject to the destruction, developed something like an episteme of the past diacosmesis. Now, because since in the conflagration there are no bodies, there is only the fiery cosmos, or we resign to not ascribe any object to this episteme, or in some way we are compelled to oblige, in a way, to ascribe to this episteme, to this knowledge, the incorporeals as the objects of this knowledge. And I think that on the basis of the text of Sixtus, by Sixtus, in which he reported the Stoic thesis of a sign as a present thing, of a present sign of present thing, we can saturate the lacuna of object in the conflagration, hypothesizing that Zeus knows true axiomata regarding the past diacosmesis and the future one. I want to also note that this particular Chrysipian conception of conflagration is described as something initiatory, something mystical, that regards the almost esoteric discourse on the gods, and I cannot exclude the possibility that the sources on this point are very reticent. It's a point. It's a possibility that we have to consider very, very seriously. This, and then there is the Stoic official canonical characterization of incorporeals as inactive and impassive or impassible entities. This makes me think that the incorporeals do not suffer anything during the conflagration. In fact, we have time as diastema of the movement, place as a space occupied by a fiery cosmos in contraction, in expansion and contraction, and the void that allows to the fiery mass to the necessary expansion, and then why not the lekta as objects of this supreme knowledge, which which Zeus enjoys of, I think.
Yeah. Can I do one little follow-up? I'm curious what you're thinking right now about the relation of lekta to words and language, because maybe that part of the theory has fallen away, or is there any sense in which the lekta for you right now are dependent on words or language?
Yes, I think that there is this dependence, but this dependence is a first of all the dependence of lekta from Zeus's mind. Dependence which reflects itself on our level when we say that the lekta are correlate to our fantasiae and the meanings of our logoi. The point is that this dependence, such a dependence, does not threaten any way the integrity of these entities. Is not we have not have to look with Platonic eyes to these entities and to a Stoic conception of these entities. Zeus is the guarantee of their integrity, of their objectivity, of their why not eternity, of their always be subsistent entities available to us in the forms of logicae fantasiae as correlates and of logoi as their semi-nomena.
Okay, thanks a lot. Anthony Hayduk.
Hi, thank you so much. It's so great to hear a talk on lekta, which really, I think, centers the divine mind. My question for you, if I'm understanding you correctly, is what you have to say about the finitude of this system. Specifically, I think you either said or implied, unless I misunderstood, that the number of lekta are finite.
Yes.
And given that not all lekta, at least I think you also said or implied this, need to be said or thought, why would this not, I think, sort of necessarily lead to an infinite number given the number of possible true or false descriptions of reality? I mean, if mathematical truths are things which lekta express, then it seems that should necessarily mean there are infinitely many. Yeah, just why assume there's a finite number if they don't need to be linked to specific acts of thought or expression?
Thank you very much. And yes, I think that this point is the point that allows us to appreciate the difference between a Platonic stance and a Stoic stance. The lekta which the finite rational living beings do not say or think are always correlated to their fantasiae. Are the lekta which subsist kata logiken fantasiae as the contents which we might say, and therefore is the quantity of lekta correlated to our minds are not infinite. We have here to deal not with independent, totally or radically independent entities of truth, as in your example, not the mathematical truth, but with entities linked, tied to our minds and to our fantasy. Therefore, the number of them is for me limited, because the content of our or object of our logicae fantasiae is always a portion of word. And therefore, the lekta correlated to our fantasiae that are always fantasiae or portions of word are limited or finite in number.
So could I just ask, like, what would your analysis be of a statement like there are not 8 million centaurs, which seems to me to be like a true axiomata, but so is there are not 8,000,001 centaurs, and so on and so forth. Would only the lecta that correspond to the instances in which I would have said something or someone would have said something like this count? And then why not all of the possible numbers of ways in which one could make this statement about how many centaurs there aren't as like contributing to this system?
But now, I think that my point is related to the fact that we are not talking about generic subjects of thoughts and of logos, but about the same individual that recur in every diacosmesis. If some of them are predetermined to think some truth, those truths will be correlated to the fantasiae. But that is not true for everyone, for every rational finite beings. There are many rational finite beings which have a limited experience, poor experience of the world, and the access to many truths are precluded for that. But this is established in the divine logos, because the divine logos displays the entire series of causes in which every event is meant to take place. And between among these events, there are also our fantasiae, our logos, to which are correlated only those lekta and only those meanings. I don't know if that answer to your question.
I think that makes sense, yeah.
Thank you. Ricardo?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. My question, Michele, has to do with the question that was asked by Vanessa, which is, I mean, what's the evidence for there being lekta at the conflagration? Well, I don't know what you think about this, but one answer could be that, well, the evidence for lekta at the conflagration is that God thinks, and if he thinks, then he's using lekta, no? Because when we think about lekta. Now, what was the evidence for the relation between thought and lekta? I think it's the difference you mentioned between logos prophorikos and logos endiathekos, no? And so, when a lecton is said, when I speak, I say lekta, but when I think, this thinking can be interpreted as an inner language. So to go back to the point, I mean, would this be right? Maybe that there are lekta at the conflagration because God thinks, and he thinks about lekta in the sense that he verbalizes this lekta in his mind. No, and would that count as evidence? Did you say?
Yes, thank you, Ricardo. It's a very relevant point. In effect, you have right. We can describe the cognitive activity of Zeus during the conflagration as inner discourse, and as a sort, therefore, of inner verbalization. Yes, right, it's very important, but I think that there is a strong, strict connection in the Stoicism between thought and lekta. If we read the Stoic definition, so to speak, of lekton as that which subsists, catalogica and fantasia, we have a clue to claim that for every act of thoughts, in connection with this act of thought, subsists a plurality of lekta, which we can say regarding the content of our fantasia. Therefore, I think that you are right. The fact that Zeus thinks during the conflagration is a clue that lekta are involved. But I also want to note that in the conflagration we have perhaps time, void, and place, all physical incorporeals. But in conflagration, Zeus thinks. How is it possible that the all incorporeals that are not present during the conflagration are the lekta, if Zeus thinks? This is my point.
I have a question about that. I have a question about this, which is the following. There is this passage from Nemesius, which is T20. No, we did this longer text where he at the end he refers to what God does at the conflagration, and so the central passage is this: is that the gods, no, this is Nemesius talking, the gods who are not subject to this destruction, thanks to their knowledge of a single period, know from it all the future things that will exist in subsequent periods. And why? Because there will be nothing different from the things that have existed before, no, and etc. So the reasoning is this: is that given that all cycles are identical, then God uses his knowledge of the present cycle to infer what will happen in future cycles. Yes. And now, if this is what God thinks about during the conflagration, namely everything that happens now, so during the conflagration, there aren't lekta. I mean, what I want to say is this: is that if God only thinks about what happens now, or what has happened now, no? When he's at the conflagration, he remembers what happened in this period and infers from that what will happen in next period. No? But then counterfactual events, such as Napoleon wins the Battle of Waterloo. No, that's a counterfactual. Well, so this is something that God will not think about at the conflagration, because he only thinks about what actually occurred. So he will not think about counterfactual state of affairs, and so there will be some sayables, some lekta that he will not think about, such as Napoleon wins the Battle of Waterloo. I mean, this is a lekton, but a lekton that God will not actually think about during the conflagration. And so my question is, what happens to that lekton? Because if lekta do depend on the mind of Zeus to exist, or to be part of reality, then a counterfactual lekton, or a lekton that expresses a counterfactual state of affairs, that will not exist or subsist because God is not thinking about it, no?
I think you are right. But thank you very much. Yes, but perhaps Zeus could perhaps think about counterfactual lekta if we think to counterfactual lekta. But only in this case. I think that this is a consequence of finite character of subsistent preserve of lekta, of this archive of sayable. In this archive is not contained any lecton. In this archive are contained only the lekta that we say and think, or might say or might think, and all true axiomata of which Zeus serve to apprehend the past diacosmesis in its entirety. But other lecta, as the contrafactual one to which you refer to, I think that do not find a place in this archive and in the Stoic ontology. I think that it is important to note this point because we have the habit to confront the Stoic semantic and ontology of lekta on the background of a theorization of Frege, Russell, Wittgenstein, in which there is no cosmology. We have here a cosmology, a cosmogonic cosmology, and a fatalistic theory of the cosmogony, in which everything, down to the smallest details, is predetermined. And among these things that are predetermined, there are also the lekta.
But yes, I mean, the trouble here is that during the conflagration we aren't there. No? So
yes.
So a lecton such as Napoleon wins the Battle of Waterloo will not be thought or said by anyone.
Yes.
So not even by God. If God only thinks about what happens actually, no. But why not say with Michele Frede that lekta are mind independent entities? Because if that's correct, then you could have infinite lekta existing during the conflagration. No? I mean, after all, the conflagration is something that happens to the physical cosmos. No? But if lekta are incorporeal entities, no, I mean, they are not subject to the conflagration or to the destruction. And as mind-independent entities, they are just there. I mean, waiting for God to think about them, or waiting for new human beings in the new cycle to think about them. But no, so why not say that lekta are mind-independent entities?
Why not say that? I think that the point is the controversial status of the conflagration. Although Chrysippus signifies in positive terms the conflagration involves the destruction of the best of the possible worlds. Therefore, I think that during the conflagration, Zeus reflects and thinks only about what has happened in the past, because what has happened in the past is the best between the things that could happen. There is no other things to which Zeus can attend to. Zeus has only Orme. We can perhaps ascribe him to perhaps an Orme if he's hegemonicon, as only Orme that of Ignoskein, as says in Nemesius, the past diacosmesis, in order to put the new diacosmesis in place. And nothing else, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rich.
I think, however, on your points is very interesting.
Vanessa?
Okay, Vanessa?
Yeah, I wanted to suggest maybe another kind of response to these last two questions.
Yes.
Maybe, God being God, it could be part of the thought that Napoleon does not win Waterloo, that he might have. And so it seems to me like these counterfactual thoughts might be somehow already included in the thoughts that he is having. And this could be true for, say, the mathematical thoughts, maybe the negative thoughts. And that would be a way to resist the mind independent, still make them dependent on the thoughts of God, but to make them, to make there be more, I guess, if not infinitely many of them.
Yes. Yes, it's a very good suggestion. It's a very good suggestion, and so you think that also Zeus have entertained the relationship with lekta, which he never think or
I was thinking that he does think these. So part of the thought that Napoleon loses is that he might have won. And I wouldn't, as you know, like I would put all of this a little bit differently. I would ground it in the concepts and I would ground it in the people and everything. But to the extent that concepts are inferential, and if something is a human, it's a rational animal, and so on, for any concept that you're using, all of that seems to me to give you easy access to the counterfactual lekta at the same time as in some sense even part of the very thought that is being had, or the axioma that's being affirmed, or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much. I have pondered on it. Yes, very good point. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Any more questions? Ricardo?
Yes. Just an extra comment on this. One way in which God would think that Napoleon wins the Battle of Waterloo, at the conflagration. One way in which we could make sense of that is that what God does is that he thinks about what is the best possible world. So he considers every possible state of affairs and reaches the conclusion that this one is the best possible one. No?
Yes.
So he actually goes through all the possibilities and thinks about counterfactual facts. No? But then the question is, I mean, is this something that God does at each conflagration? I mean, going through all the possible state of affairs and finding out that after all, this one is the best one. And no, I mean, he would seem to repeat a very complex task at every conflagration, which are infinite in number. So no, I mean, that sounds a bit irrational, no? Doesn't it? I mean, to think infinite times the same thing. No, I don't know. What
Yes,
yeah.
It's possible. It's interesting what you say. Zeus reproduces every time a process of thought, of reconsideration of the best of the possible worlds. And in this reconsideration, he pay attention also to the counterfactual lekta. It is possible, and I think that, for example, the use of parakolutesantas in Nemesius may have something to do with that, because in that verb there is something like a true process of tending to something. It is also as the Big's knowledge were every time new in Zeus. As Zeus repeat every time this knowledge, and as were the first time. And in this case, of course, the counterfactual lekta enter into play, and enter in play surely a relevant role, I think.
Very much.
Thanks a lot. David?
Thank you very much.
Were you talking to me?
Yes.
Hi. I just wonder whether an Aristotelian take on this would help. When we stop worrying about whether Zeus has to know infinitely many things. I guess the same would apply not just to knowing, but to never failing to reach a correct opinion. I think Aristotle would say that's fine, but that's a first actuality. God knows everything, not in the sense that he's actively exercising that knowledge all the time,
Yes.
but just in the sense that if you ask him a question, he'll always get the answer right, including about all the infinitely many numbers. Is there anything like Aristotelian potentiality in Stoicism? I think it's one considerable mystery why, in general, the potentiality actuality distinction didn't catch on with Hellenistic philosophers. Do you think that's relevant to you?
Now, I have to think about it, but Aristotle thinks that God has noises of noesios, and but in the first book of Metaphysics, he ascribes to Zeus a Sophia, supreme Sophia, of a science of divine things, no?
Right, but I'm not really asking about Aristotle's theology, which, I mean, you couldn't possibly begin to discuss without having a week available. But just about Aristotle's, a very simple analytic tool that Aristotle uses to very good effect.
Yes.
Am I right in saying or suspecting that that was just lost in Hellenistic philosophy?
Yes.
And that this is one of the victims, really, because it would make it so easy to say what it is for God to be omniscient if it was just he has a if it was just a second potentiality or first potentiality.
Yes, the difference is perhaps that Aristotle has an eternalistic conception of the cosmos.
Right.
We have no phase like a conflagration in which is a cosmic for definition. No, the definition is a cosmic, is the negation, a cosmia. No, we read in Philo of Alexandria, cosmia, the negation of cosmos. In Aristotle, therefore, this activity presupposes the integrity, the integrity of the cosmos. In the Stoics, this integrity there isn't, because the cosmos there isn't anymore. There are only fire, and in this phase, Zeus develops a particular kind of activity, which is activity directed upon a particular kind of entities that are present but regard the past and the future. No? In Aristotle, I think that the knowledge is always of present thing, no? And only of this.
Sorry, a present thing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
In the Stoics, the knowledge of Zeus is the knowledge of present things regarding past diakosmesis and future diakosmesis.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. If there are no more questions, I will make one. Yes, I mean, I just had the doubt that I didn't find it plausible, that philosophically plausible, that God thinks everything again at the end of each cycle, at the moment of the conflagration. So I mean, it was similar to what Ricardo was saying. Why doesn't God simply say, let things be as they were in the last cycle? And then they will be as that. I mean, or is more, I mean, or if in a more sophisticated way, why doesn't think just about a small set of fundamental truths about the initial state of the world and metaphysical laws and physical laws and logical laws, and then say, and everything that follows from that? I mean, he doesn't have to think about every small matter because everything is determined from the initial state of the world. So, so I don't see it plausible that God would think everything up every time, right? So it's enough to think about the fundamental truths of the initial state of the world. And so just a few lekta will survive, let's say, the conflagration. So why doesn't you think that that can be plausible, and that doesn't create trouble for what you were saying?
Yes. Thank you very much. Very good question. It's possible. Yes. Why not? We have no information about the kind of knowledge Zeus develops, and about how many objects Zeus knows during the conflagration. It is possible that this knowledge regards only a very small number of fundamental truths, the ones that guarantee the development of the cosmos, the way in which Zeus has explained that cosmos must develop. I think that, however, that Zeus must every time, and perhaps this is in the line of thought of Ricardo, reappropriates of the cosmos that undergone the destruction. And he has to contemplate in its entirety. I think that, for example, to passages like the one from Dion, Chrysostomos, on which also Ricardo has produced a beautiful paper, the auge of conflagration, contrasted with fire, Cleantian fire. It's something like a spectacle to which Zeus takes part, of a contemplation of the past diacosmesis. Something beautiful that Zeus wants to recreate in the union with Aphrodite, with Hera. No, there is mystical union, no? That put in motion again and again the cosmos, loved and admired by Zeus himself. The second hypothesis is compatible, I think, that with the fact that Zeus contemplates and knows the diacosmesis in its entirety. And that his knowledge regards not only some elementary truth, fundamental truth, but only truth regarding the past diacosmesis, I think. Thank you very much, however. Very interesting point.
No, thanks a lot for the response. Very thoughtful. Yes, Vanessa?
Yes, this was just about the same thing. So, I mean, I guess one of the reasons it seems implausible to think that God is thinking all these things during the conflagration is just that it seems like a lot of work when Zeus is supposed to be resting. And I was thinking one response you might give to that is just that, sure, maybe it is a lot of thinking, but it's a lot less work than having to physically unfold the cosmos itself. And so it's still going to cost maybe less energy than the actual living of and doing of the cosmos. So thinking about it would, even if you're thinking all the things, would still count as some kind of respite from the doing of all of the things.
Very beautiful point. Yes, Zeus, according to you, rests and makes economy of thought during the conflagration. Yes, it's very interesting, very beautiful. It's possible. Yes, of course. He has no need to think to other thing. It suffices what the diacosmesis has to offer, because the diacosmesis is the best thing that exists and can exist.
And even if thinking about all the ways in which it is best includes going through all of the counterfactuals and all of the mathematical thoughts and all of that, it will still come out as less work. And I guess also because it's best, it will be a pleasant endeavor. And so in that respect, it will seem less implausible and less onerous to attribute that activity to him during the conflagration.
Thank you very much.
If there are no more questions, then we should thank Michele for this great talk. Yes.
Thank you.